Hello, before I get started here, I just want to let you know that if you're listening to this on YouTube, I did put a graphic up for the entire length of this podcast, but I don't know why it just shows up as completely pitch black. It doesn't show up. I don't really have the time to figure out what the glitch is because I just updated my operating system actually on Apple. A lot of times I have glitches, and so there seems to be a glitch in iMovie. It doesn't show my graphic shows, and when I edit it in iMovie, but then when I save it, it disappears. So anyways, this is just an audio podcast anyway, so just listen to the audio. And sorry that there's no graphic at all, it's just pitch black. All right, take care. What's good, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another SK Wealth Academy podcast. Before I get started, for those of you that aren't familiar, I'm only posting this on YouTube because it seems like a lot of people do not know that I'm still posting content since I have effectively really stopped posting new content on YouTube. So I'm just going to post this podcast on YouTube and maybe one other just to remind people to come find me on Spotify, on iTunes, and at blueberry.com. I think in the past I actually said blueberry.net. That was incorrect. You could find different ways to remain notified and receive notifications of new podcast content that I'm posting, which I am doing fairly frequently now, which a lot of people that used to follow me on YouTube do not know. So please go over to Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com / the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast, all one word without any spaces. Again, the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast. And again, Tao is spelled T-A-O, and Blueberry, BLUBRRY.com / the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast. And also, by looking up the same name, the Tao of SK Wealth Academy podcast, you can find me on iTunes, you can find me on Spotify, so you can download and listen to my podcast on your drive to work, download it to your iPod, and listen to it on the subway. If you live in New York or Seoul or any other big cities where traveling by subway is a common means of getting around the city. And lastly, if you want to become a patron, you can find me at Patreon, patreon.com / SK Wealth Academy. And there I also post some exclusive Patreon-only content not available to the public, although I'm going to keep posting publicly for free some pretty frequent and regular content. So if you want to see what you can receive if you become a patron, just go over to patreon.com / SK Wealth Academy. Okay, let's get started. That's enough of the public service announcement. So today's SK Wealth Academy podcast is going to cover the topic, are we really free? So what do I mean by that? I mean that we have an illusion of freedom in which I think people often operate totally within the limitations and confines of the societal constructs built by those in power and that have been in place for hundreds of years, and believe there's a certain level of freedom being exercised and free choice being exercised, but it is not a wide range of free choice that's being exercised. It's being only exercised within a very narrow spectrum of limitations and constructs, and that basically deals with from people from age 6 to age 60 or age 50 or whenever age they retire, age 70, because we're shuttled like cattle into certain societal constructs, whether it's the institutional academic system, and then after that, whether it's grad school or if high school, university is your last stop, then the career path, right? The career societal construct, which will occupy your time from either age 18 or age 20 to age, like I said, age 50, age 60, age 70. And then from age 0 to age 6 or whatever year you enter academia, the academic system, if you go to preschool, might be age 4. So you might only have basically options for a wide diversity of choices from age 0 to age 4, and then from age 60 or 70 till you die, which is crazy. So that is why this is such an important topic of if we are really free. And I hope all of you stay tuned and listen to this, and also comment below if you're listening to one of the forums where you can comment, such as blueberry.com or on my daily blog at smartknowledgeu.com, because I'm posting some of my podcasts there too. Please do comment below, because I love to hear your opinion. So let's get started with an analogy, because when someone is seeking out a martial arts school, if they're a beginner and they haven't trained at all, I usually give them a couple pieces of advice and guidance so they can select a very good sensei or sifu, depending upon if the martial art they're learning is Chinese or Japanese, or of course there's French martial arts, there's Israeli martial arts, there's Indonesian martial arts. So basically, if someone does not have any martial arts training and experience, I always tell them take someone that has trained in the style in which they wish to train with them to assess that school. So whether that's Aikijitsu or Silat or Kyokushinkai Karate, the reason they should take someone that has trained in that particular style is because, martial arts are like Asian ethnicities. Korean is not the same as Chinese, is not the same as Vietnamese, is not the same as Laotian, is not the same as Cambodian, is not the same as Japanese, is not the same as Indian, is not the same as Filipino. So martial arts, although people think that don't have any experience with it, think they're all the same, they can be incredibly, incredibly different. And so, Muay Thai is going to be even different from Pensat Silat. So if you take someone that has trained in the style that you wish to train in, at least you can have a trained eye be able to assess the teacher and give you an opinion as far as whether that instructor is good or not. And then as well, this is something that even a beginner can assess. It doesn't need a trained eye to assess. I always tell this person to not only study the teacher, but watch the students. So a martial arts instructor can have exceptional skills, but still can be a very poor teacher. And if so, his or her students will reveal this characteristic, that they are not good at imparting the skills and knowledge to their students, because their students are going to seem very unskilled, and they're also going to likely be undisciplined. But if you observe students that are respectful and courteous, kind towards one another, and disciplined, and by kind I don't mean like not aggressive, because martial arts is exactly what it sounds like. It's martial, it's warlike. So if they're too kind, too gentle, they're not really going to be learning any skill that's useful in real life if they're actually attacked. So they need a certain level of aggression needs to be displayed by the students, but with care, with kindness, because you don't want students that are going to be aggressive, but also take care of ensuring that they don't inflict injury upon their fellow students. Because if they're going to break a bone or dislocate a joint, then what good is it to that student if they're out of commission for 3-4 months where they have to heal? So you want students that are going to be respectful of other students' health. So, people say, well, isn't that a given? No, it's not a given, because I've seen poor martial arts schools where the instructors are just breaking apart the students, just using the students to further their own skill, where they have no concern for the health of their students. And I've seen that same interaction between students, and that's certainly a school you do not want to train at. So these rules, people might be thinking at this point already, why are you talking about martial arts? I'm not here to learn about martial arts. I'm here to learn about why we really aren't free. Well, these same guidance and principles that I tell people to use when assessing an instructor also applies to academics, because if academic systems are truly educating young adults, then I claim that, because I attest that 99% of institutional brick and mortar classrooms are not truly providing education, but more so interested even to the ignorance of the teacher. They are providing more social behavioral conditioning than true education. Because if academic systems were truly educating young adults, then we should all be able to learn a ton from our peers, our student peers that also are sitting right next to us in our classroom. So, and in fact, we should be able to learn more from our peers than even our teachers, because in all schools, students interact much more with their fellow students than their teacher, just because of the nature of the ratio of students to teacher. There might be 30 students per teacher. And just because of the nature of social interaction, a student's not going to interact socially with his or her teacher throughout the course of the day, but he or she's going to interact with maybe even dozens of their fellow students through the course of a day. So think about this. How many of us during our academic years had conversations with our peers that blew us away and made us think for days? Because I would claim that if school were truly educational, these experiences should happen every single week of the entire school year. But if you think about it, because I've been out of school for a long time, but for those of you that are listening to this are still in school or just recently out of the academic system, think about how many of these conversations you have with your fellow students, where your fellow students just imparted knowledge to you, just not knowledge for the sake of like being pedantic and memorizing facts, and because that's just rote memorization. That's not really displaying any type of critical thinking or knowledge that is really going to be useful in life to you. But think about any conversation you've had with a student, a fellow student, in which he or she imparted knowledge to you that you could use to actually improve your life. Because that's what I'm talking about with these types of conversations that we have that might blow us away and make us think for days. Because when I think about it, unless times have changed today, I would say I was lucky if I had one of these conversations every several years with one of my fellow students, not every single week. But I would really conclude that if academic systems were truly educational, then we should be able to have one of these type of conversations that really blows us away once a week. So parents that realize this, that realize what I have just said, tend to opt to homeschool their children if they have the time and the financial resources to do it. But somehow, even though we can have an adult conversation with a 13-year-old homeschooled child at a level that's far superior to a 13-year-old child processed by the institutional academic system, which serves as proof that homeschooling is actually educating children at a far superior level than the institutional academic system that 99.9% of people around the world attend, then this in itself tells me that there's still a stigma attached to homeschooling, which is ridiculous. Because if homeschooling is going to make a child more intellectual, more thoughtful, more apt to think for himself or for herself, there should be a stigma attached to institutional academics, to the brick and mortar classroom, and not to homeschooling. It should be flipped the other way. So this is what I mean when the whole world is flipped upside down, when good is assessed to be bad and bad is assessed to be good. So furthermore, because some people say, well, everyone has a choice to homeschool a child if you have a child. So why are you saying we are truly not free? And the reason is because sometimes the state tries to bring the hammer down on parents that homeschool their children, because the state, meaning the people in control of the government, the people in control of the money in every nation in the entire world, want to socially condition that child in a certain way that is going to make them think in a manner that is completely different from the way in which you want that child to think. So I've actually talked to parents during my travels throughout Southeast Asia that have told me that the government has pressured them into sending their homeschooled kids into the academic system with threats of financial fines, threats of punishment if they refuse to do so. And this, despite the fact that these very same parents told me that their homeschooled kids have scored at the very top of their class in national exams. So they're even demonstrating that homeschooling works, but yet there's people within the state that still want them to be socially and behaviorally conditioned as they want them to be, and not as their own parents. It's almost like students are property of the state, and the state wants to have more say over how parents' kids are raised than the very parents that birthed these kids. So how free are we when we aren't even free to choose the manner in which we want to be educated? So I know that different nations look at homeschooling in different ways, and that some governments are far more punitive towards parents that want to homeschool their children. But this issue should not be an issue on any nation on planet Earth. Every parent should be allowed to educate their child, and every child should be allowed to choose how he or she wants to be educated in every nation on planet Earth, without the meddling of some politician or some banker trying to condition condition the child, like to respond like a Pavlovian dog. That those are dogs that are conditioned to salivate when they heard a dinner bell ring, because they were conditioned to associate ringing bell with receiving food. So we should not be subjected to have our, any children or any young adults subjected to Skinnerian operant condition, Pavlovian conditioning at the academic level if people want to homeschool their children. So again, the whole reason I'm getting ready to launch SKWealth Academy, which is going to be a comprehensive online educational forum in a few months, is because of my strong dissatisfaction with the lack of education and academics today. As much as that sounds like an oxymoron, if you keep listening, you'll realize why I'm saying that there's almost a complete and utter lack of education in many academic topics today. And not only that, this is a far greater sin. There's utter and complete lack in academic classrooms of teachers teaching students how to apply knowledge to better their lives. In fact, there's just a lot of rote memorization of knowledge that the students will never learn how to apply that knowledge to make their lives better. So there are plenty of examples of people that never attended the typical brick and mortar school that have displayed today far superior ability to apply knowledge than those that attended school. For example, just look at the culinary arts, for example. Look at chefs, and so many top chefs in the world never went to culinary schools or never went to famous culinary schools, but they learned how to cook from their parents or their grandparents, or they learned recipes handed down in their family that have been in the family for multi-generations. So just off the top of my head, I can think of Eddie Wong, who opened up Bauhaus in New York City. So he was a chef that basically learned cooking from his mother, I believe. And then when I was still living in Los Angeles, I remember going out to eat at a restaurant in Beverly Hills called Crustacean, that's famous for its garlic noodles dish. And in fact, I remember hearing that it's such a top secret how this garlic noodles dish that this particular restaurant is really famous for is prepared, that they have a secret kitchen inside the main kitchen that only family members are allowed to enter when they prepare this dish. So it's a closely held family secret passed down from generation to generation. So again, very famous dishes in one of the biggest international cities in the world, in Los Angeles. The ability to make this dish was passed down from generation to generation and not in school. And in Thailand, I've visited many street food stalls in Chinatown that again are famous for just serving up delicious food. And again, they're cooked by people with no culinary school experience, but just armed with generational family recipes. And it's not something just like the culinary arts, but you also have people that never went to school that have shown a far superior ability to apply knowledge. Just look at Jack Ma. If you guys don't know who Jack Ma is, he's the founder of Alibaba. in China. So Jack Ma went to university in China in Hangzhou. Forgive me if I'm really mispronouncing that word. I don't know. Really can't speak Mandarin or Cantonese, so I don't know how Chinese words should be pronounced. But he went to a university called Hangzhou Teachers College, which is not a prominent university. In fact, Jack Ma says typically only poor people go there. And in fact, his father was among his biggest detractor when Jack Ma graduated from this not prominent university in China, and when he started forming Alibaba, his own father warned him about his dangerous ideas to try to change how business was done in China. So and people have said who really know Jack Ma, know these discussions he had with his father. It was because his father, this is what was said, is because his father said if Jack had lived in an earlier generation, his ideas as far as how to change the business world in China were so dangerous that it might have led to his imprisonment. But think about this, because there was an interview that Jack Ma gave in which he said, quote, "I failed a key primary school test 2 times. I failed the middle school test 3 times. I failed the college entrance exam 2 times. And when I graduated, I was rejected for most jobs I applied for out of college." End quote. And in fact, Mr. Ma said he even applied to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And he said there were 24 applicants, people that applied for the job he applied for. And he said he was the only one out of 24 to be rejected. So how does someone like this, that really has, not a high level of schooling, went to a not prominent university in China, start one of the biggest companies in China and become one of the wealthiest entrepreneurs in the entire world? This is proof positive that schooling does not educate, it fails to educate across, I'm not saying it doesn't educate at all, but it fails to educate to a very, very large degree. When time and time again, we can see examples of people that with far superior, supposedly education, I often refer to as academia, because I don't like to conflate academia with education, because I think they're 2 entirely different things. So I don't think academia is necessarily education, and I don't think academia is necessarily valuable, but I 100% believe that education is valuable. Now, the reason I say this is that even the sciences, like mathematics, have been stripped of their science, as weird as that sounds, because in high school, when I studied advanced calculus, all we were taught was how to solve these complex calculus equations, but we were never taught how those complex calculus equations could actually apply to real life, how we would use that in real life to improve our lives. So that is the scientific part, that is the applicable part in real life, because without that, without bridging that gap of understanding, then really just learning to solve complex formulas is quite useless, because it's just rote memorization. It's rote memorization of how, maybe complex formulas will take 20 steps, but it's still rote memorization. And even in university, when I majored in neurobiology, I was still studying sciences that were stripped of their scientific aspects. So when I was learning organic chemistry, some exams I had, I literally had to remember like 40 equations of compound A plus compound B produces compound what, and that was the exam. It's just rote memorization. It has nothing to do with how I can use organic chemistry to actually improve my life. So because even the sciences are stripped of their science today, and it mostly is dependent upon rote memorization, then students that graduate from academic institutions can easily be replaced by machines that can solve these equations much more efficiently. However, truly educated kids cannot easily be replaced by machines. So this is the problem. If you are a student in school right now, in an academic institution, and you're sitting in a classroom and you're learning scientists stripped of their science, you can be easily replaced by machines because machines can solve equations. They can do what you're being taught to in school at a far more efficient pace than you could ever solve these equations. So if you're truly educated in the sciences and you're taught how to apply that knowledge to actually improve life, because that requires critical thinking and that requires creativity, those are two aspects that cannot be replaced by machines. So the problem is that a lot of students that graduate from the brick and mortar classroom are going to be easily replaced by machines, and the only students studying science that are not going to be easily replaced by machines are those that are being homeschooled or that have sought out alternative education forums where they're actually being taught how to apply their knowledge to the real world. And by the way, this same argument can be applied to business, especially to business, because even though I got my Master of Business Administration, I find that degree absolutely useless. Even though I went to a top 15 program in the United States. So, and the reason was because everything I learned in theory was not how the real world actually works. So once I went and started working in the real world, I learned that everything I learned in my MBA program was a complete farce, and it's certainly not how the real world works. And again, I'll explain that in great detail in my SKWealth Academy when I release it. I'm going to tell you everything you learn in business school that is completely, absolute garbage and rubbish, even though, and here's the other problem with people that have graduated with advanced degrees, because, I used to be one of these naive people too, because I graduated from an Ivy League institution in America. It's supposed to be one of the top 5 schools in the entire United States. And the problem is, even if your parents are paying for your education or you're helping out, because I worked, freshman year to senior year. And so I helped pay my way through undergraduate university. But if you or your parents are combined together are paying a lot of money to receive a degree from a so-called prestigious university, then it's really difficult to have conversations with such people because of the fact that either they or their parents spent so much money on their degree that the amount of money spent on their degree of academics, not education, binds their thinking to all the narratives that they had been taught in school, whether true or not. So if you go, say, get a degree in economics from the London School of Economics or from Princeton University, then you're not going to be open to the fact that what you learned in school could be possibly wrong. And I'm telling you, there's a lot of things that are taught in degrees of economics and masters in business administration that are completely wrong. I guarantee you that a lot are untrue. So that's the problem, is that it's super difficult to have conversations with people that have extremely high academic degrees, but yet can still be uneducated. So how free are we? How free are we when most of us are shuttled through the system, right? We're always taught you got to go to some academic institution. The more prestigious, the better. The higher the degrees, the better. But you're learning within a really limited and confined methodology of thinking, and it's not really promoting wide diversity. It's not promoting divergent thinking. It's promoting convergent thinking. So you're not encouraged to really assess the wide spectrum of different solutions to a problem that may exist, because a lot of problems just don't have one solution. And that is the problem with academia, and that's the problem with the freedom of choice we allegedly have. Because if you don't realize the difference between academics and education, then if you enter the academic system, you're going to believe that you have freedom of choice, but it's not really. So again, how free are we really? And the last topic I want to talk about in today's podcast are vaccines. So I want to know why we can't question the efficiency and validity for all the vaccines that kids receive today. Because, okay, I know that most people, if you say, I don't really believe that a child needs all the vaccines he or she is administered today, that you become some type of conspiracy theorist. But that's just garbage, because we should be able to question the validity of a newborn baby having to receive so many vaccines today. And just for a number of reasons, because we're not allowed to question anything anymore. If it goes against the consensus of the authoritative institution that is promoting a certain narrative, then all of a sudden you become a conspiracy theorist, which is ridiculous. So, I understand the biological origins and medical origins of vaccinations more than the common person. But yet the common person I've had this discussion with people with no background in medicine, biology. I was a neurobiology undergraduate major. Basically laugh off when I really questioned the validity. And I worked in healthcare right after university, and I actually met some nurses that felt the same way as I did. And the reason being is, when I was a child, as far as if my memory is correct, I only received 3 vaccinations. Now, a couple were combination vaccinations, so known as DPT, which is diphtheria, pertussis, and tetanus shot. And that's actually given to you when you're older, not as an infant up to 15 months of age. And then there is MMR, measles, mumps, rubella, and then I received the polio vaccine. And I only received 3 vaccines, and I am totally fine. So if I could survive, then people just say, well, medicine develops, so now that there's more vaccinations against more diseases, then little infants should get it. An infant, a newborn baby, I don't have a child, I'm not married at this point, and so but all those who are married and have children know that a newborn baby within 12 hours of birth will receive the hepatitis B vaccine. Now, I looked into that and I said, why is a child receiving a vaccination for a disease that's typically transmitted? It's a blood-borne disease, either through blood infection or as a sexually transmitted disease. I think is the most common method of receiving this disease. It's a newborn baby. And what makes sense when I looked into it is that the mother could have hepatitis B and pass it on to the child. But it doesn't say what the odds are if the mother received the hepatitis B vaccine. Wouldn't she be immune? And what are the odds of her passing on the hepatitis B virus to her child? And they said, well, sometimes the tests don't really show that the mom could have hepatitis B when she has it. Well, if she received the hepatitis B vaccine and the vaccination actually works, then wouldn't the odds of her passing on hepatitis B to the child be almost nil? I mean, I don't know. If someone out there knows that answer to that question, then please comment below. Because then I would think, okay, what's the purpose of giving a child this vaccination within the first 12 months of life? Now, also, a lot of people will say, well, there's no scientific evidence that links autism to the increase in vaccinations. And, I'm not saying that there is, because I really haven't researched this topic fully, and I never really speak very adamantly about topics that I haven't yet researched fully. But all I am doing is questioning, and I'm questioning because this podcast is titled, Are We Really Free? And if we're not free to question certain narratives, how free are we really? I do know that there are 4 types of vaccines that are currently available. So there are live virus vaccines, which basically is a live form of the virus that's contained in the vaccine, but a very weakened form of the virus. So it stimulates the body to produce antibodies, and that's how the vaccine works. So, for example, one of the 3 vaccines I received as a child, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, is a live virus vaccine. There are also inactivated vaccines, so the polio vaccines, it's called IPVs, an inactivated polio vaccine. Also, a part of the DPT, the pertussis, which is whooping cough I don't even know what whooping cough is, because the smallpox vaccine was basically eliminated because there hasn't been an incidence of smallpox in, I think, centuries, if not at least many decades, but I think it's been well over a century. So when was the last incidence of whooping cough? Is that something that still exists? I don't know, because I said I haven't researched this fully. But if so, why are children still giving the whooping cough vaccine? Because I haven't heard of that in ages. It might be more common than I think. I don't know. But okay, the third type of vaccines, toxoid vaccine. It contains a toxin or chemical made by the bacteria or virus, which again stimulates antibodies to that particular virus. And the last is biosynthetic vaccines, which are manufactured from man-made substances very similar to pieces of the virus or bacteria. And the hepatitis B, which a child receives in the first 12 months of life, is a biosynthetic vaccine. But here is the problem with not being able to question. Number one, like I said, because if I only received 3 vaccines and I was fine, why do kids need to get so many vaccines? Because this is a billion-dollar industry. So don't tell me money has nothing to do with it, because there are plenty of times I went to a doctor and questioned all of the medications that a doctor was trying to prescribe to me for just a small little ailment. I've had martial arts injuries and had doctors prescribe super expensive muscle relaxants and painkillers when I told the doctors that I had a very high threshold for pain, didn't need any painkillers, and they still tried to prescribe me painkillers, which I refused at the hospital pharmacy. So don't tell me that money is not a driver of healthcare today, and that sometimes money trumps the actual health of a person. Because, say some of these strong opioids, did you know synthetically that are chemically, they're almost identical to heroin. So they'll get you hooked. And then once hooked for a long time, the pharmaceutical companies make a lot of money. So when I was looking at the updated vaccination schedule, it actually really increased from 5 vaccines to a ridiculous 10 vaccines that a 15-month child is supposed to receive. By the time a child is 15 months, they're supposed to receive 10 vaccines. So in addition to the 3 that I received as a child, there's now, like I said, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, varicella, I'm not sure what that is, influenza, which is just the flu vaccine, which I have something to say about as well. They receive pneumococcal conjugate and Haemophilus influenza type B, which is another type of flu, and the rotavirus vaccine. So the flu vaccine is something that was given to all employees at the healthcare company I worked at for free every winter. And I used to get it until one time I became really sick from the flu vaccine, and I actually had a pretty bad case of flu. So I said, you know what, every winter I don't really get the flu. So the only time I got the flu was when I got this vaccine, and that is as an adult with a mature immunity system. So we're talking about children 15 months and older sometimes having to be exposed to a combination of live virus vaccines. Of course, the inactivated virus vaccines are less dangerous, but there's certainly some danger to even receiving a weak attenuated form of a live virus. So sometimes they'll receive like 5 vaccines in the same visit. And I just think that since a child's immune system is not mature, that there is some danger. Again, I haven't researched this topic in great depth, but it seems to me that there has been a correlation, because it was about, about 10 years ago, a decade ago, when the number of recommended vaccinations increased from 5 to 10 for children 15 months and younger. And what's ridiculous is it doesn't stop, because there's another 4. There's meningococcal B vaccine, I think, which is a vaccination against meningitis. There's human papilloma virus. There's pneumococcal polysaccharide, and there's there's meningococcal. I guess that's just I don't know. There's meningococcal B. So there's an additional 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So a total of 15 vaccines as an adult. And I told you again, I only received 3, and I am totally healthy, totally fine. I rarely ever get sick. So there's an increase, a massive increase in the number of recommended vaccinations by the American Pediatric Association and global wide about 10 years ago. And, there is a jump in autism in children in America that started about 10 years ago. And so about 2000, the incidence of autism in children 8 years and younger was 1 in 150. And then it increased to 1 in 68 by 2012, and now it's 1 in 59 8-year-olds in 2014. I'm not sure in 2018 what it is, but it seems to be increasing every single year. And correlation, of course, does not mean causation. So just because there's a correlation of the time when the number of vaccinations children started to receive multiple vaccinations in the same visit. And I'm not talking 1, 2, or 3. Sometimes I think they receive 5 at the same time. Sometimes I know they receive at least 4, because when I was working in healthcare, and that was a while ago, that children, newborn babies, would get a shot in the left arm, in the right arm, in the left thigh, and the right thigh. So I remember at least 4 at the same time, which I think is, so it's not necessarily, I'm not saying that, again, there's a causative factor between vaccinations and autism. Okay, I'm not saying that at all, but I'm saying that at least we should look into and see if there's a link between correlation and causation, because I'm not saying that children shouldn't be receiving these vaccines. I'm arguing that maybe there's some causation because they're receiving so many vaccines at the same time, at the same visit, with immature immune systems at such a young age of 15 months. So maybe they could spread it out over a longer period of time, but maybe the pharmaceutical industry and the medical associations just want to cram everything into the first 15 months of life, because they're most likely to make the most money that way. If you spread it out over time, the parents might not bring back their kids for some of these vaccinations that might not be necessary. I would be happy if I had a child with my child just receiving the 3 vaccinations I received, and I would think that would be adequate, because if I could make it and supposedly we live in a more, every subsequent year we live in a more sanitary world. So shouldn't there be less need for vaccines instead of more need for vaccines? It's just like, you can't believe everything industries say, because they are motivated by money, and they will cover up truth because of money. So again, I'm not saying there's a causation factor between autism and vaccinations, but at least people should look at the correlation and determine for sure, just really dig deep, because it's the same thing with genetically modified organisms, right? When you had GMO foods that were really, really forwarded by Monsanto, and they say, oh, there's no link between GMO food, eating GMO food, you can eat them all you want, even though GMO foods all use Roundup, this chemical spray. And I remember specifically, distinctly, that Monsanto executive said Roundup is so safe that you could drink it, a whole glass of Roundup, just like water. They said it's as safe as drinking water. But now, what do you see? A decade later, I think this was at least a decade ago when they said that. A decade later now, you see that they say so many food that is geared toward children contain cancer-causing Roundup. So now they admit that Roundup causes cancer. And they said in levels that are far beyond what is considered healthy. So it's not just like trace amounts of this chemical that maybe won't be harmful to your body, but they say that the levels are carcinogens from Roundup in children's foods in America is well beyond the safe limits. So again, what motivated Monsanto executives to say Roundup is as safe as drinking water back then was money. And so big industry lies all the time. So the fact of me questioning these vaccinations is because, in a lot of nations, if your kids don't receive all these vaccinations, they can't go to school, which might be a good thing anyways, because your kids will be much more intelligent if they're homeschooled versus being required to receive these massive doses of vaccines in a very concentrated period of time, the first 15 months of life, that maybe these vaccinations will not be harmful if it's spread out over a longer period of time. So that is all I am saying about vaccination. So let me know if you agree or disagree that perhaps the negative effect of very young children, infants basically, receiving so many vaccines at the same time that have live viruses may not be a good thing, even though individually each vaccine may be a good thing. It's just the concentration of so many vaccines at the same time at a very young age. So that is that topic. That is basically the topic for today. So let me know if you're listening to this on blueberry.com, and you can comment below. If you're listening to this on my blog at smartknowledgeu.com/blog, let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree or disagree as far as the freedom that we really have. I really believe that it's an illusion only from the perspective that we do have a choice. But the fact is that most people don't make a choice outside of a narrow, very confined, limited amount of choices. They keep 99% of society make their choices within this narrow spectrum, and don't really, I would even say that narrow spectrum of choices for everything, whether it comes to academics, whether it comes to your career choices. You know, if a bell curve and you see like 40% or 50% fall within the meat of the bell curve, and then you might have on the other side the 25% falling on each side of the bell curve. Sorry if you don't know what a bell curve is, but just say that the outliers, not only the outliers, but even the slim portions of the bell curve, which are where the intelligent choices exist for most people to have a fulfilling life and to reach their creative potential, that most people don't even know that option exists, because we just blindly go through life and do and live our lives within the societal constructs that have been pre-engineered from birth. That's why we don't think about it. From birth, we're told this is how you live your life. These are the choices you make. So if we don't consider those choices, then how are we really free? Okay, that's all for today. I hope I made you think. I hope that if this podcast made you think, that you will have these same discussions with your friends as well. And it'll be interesting to hear what your friends think. And actually, before I go, I want to give one tip to those of you that listened all the way to the end as a show of my appreciation for you listening to this entire podcast. I'm going to give you a tip. Now, the economy is bad everywhere, and we are actually in recession, but the way that, you know, the official statistics are compiled by those in the financial sectors in most nations, are saying that we're going to enter recession. We're not in it. I would argue that we're actually in a recession. If you ask people just that run businesses, because a lot of times when you work for someone else, you don't really see the recession, but if you're running your own business, you certainly see it. And whether you're in Asia, whether you're in Europe, whether you're in the Americas, whether you're in Africa, you're seeing recession on every single continent in the entire world. So the one thing is that a lot of people think that this is not the time to start a new business, because people are really trying to save. They don't have a lot of money, that the opportunity is not there. Now, I would argue the opposite, because during times of recession, people are really disenchanted with the system. They kind of feel like, you know, that from that movie, The Matrix, when Lawrence Fishburne's character said to Keanu Reeves that there's something bothering him, that's like a splinter in his mind, and he knows and he feels that something is wrong, but he can't really place his finger on exactly what's wrong. Well, that is the kind of feeling that just pulses through society during times of recession. So if there's dissatisfaction, guess what? That means there's opportunity out there. If you basically serve that, fulfill that void that people are feeling, and you provide a service that fills that dissatisfaction, then you have so much opportunity. So I would even argue that opportunity is perhaps even better during times of recession than during economic booms, because during economic booms, people are really happy and they're not really going to be looking for the best solution to their problem. They're just going to, just roll with the punches, go with the flow, and they're not necessarily going to be looking for the best solution. But I believe during times of recession, people are actually going to seek out the best solution. And the solution is not there yet. So you can provide that solution, fill that need, and then build a really great business. But not only that, build a great business with really critical thinking intellectuals too. So you can build great communities. And I just think there's a lot of opportunity that people don't see during hard economic times. So that is my tip of the day. I'm going to try to make this a common occurrence for all my podcasts. So and I might not just put it at the end, because then people might skip the middle part and then just go to the end. So maybe I'll stick the tip of the day, the tip of each podcast that I feel will be really useful to people. Maybe I'll put it in the middle. Maybe I'll put it in the beginning. We'll see. Okay. As always remember to be grateful, to feel blessed, be mindful most of all. So be present, because that's one of the best ways to be happy, is always to be present. Don't be living in the future. Don't be living in the past, but live in the present, especially when spending times with friends. Be very present. Give them 100% of your attention, and they will absolutely appreciate that. Okay, have a blessed day, everyone. And as always, remember to remain intensely curious. So long.